So, John, spring is here, or at least in the real estate world, we say spring is here when you hit March. So, before we spring forward into real estate, what's going to happen in the future, our predictions, let's talk about what happened last month in February. What were your observations of what went on last month?
It was definitely a bit quieter. I think we saw that across most communities. We saw anywhere from 20 to 40% dip in sales. I wouldn't call it dead. I mean, the good ones are always selling, but statistically, we're down. Activity is quite a bit quieter, and that's not normally what we see leading into spring. I can't help but think a lot of that's got to do with some of the tariff threats and uncertainty coming out of the US right now, uh, giving people that probably a bit of reason to push pause and step back, evaluate the situation.
Absolutely. I think, I mean, it's been such a flip-flop back and forth on that side that absolutely it's making people question where we stand and what's going on out there financially. On top of that, it's also created a lot more chatter now around more rate reductions from the Bank of Canada.
Yeah.
So we heard over the first 2 months of the year, first 6 weeks of the year anyways, that there could potentially be a slowdown to those rate reductions. And now because of all of this tariff threats, I guess, that we're dealing with, turmoil. Now the Bank of Canada is talking about further rate cuts, which again, that's going to help buyers and things like that. Like you said, there's been a reduction across pretty much every city in the GTA, GTHA. Pricing sat relatively flat, but the other stat that stuck out for me was the number of new listings that came on the
Yeah.
market. So we already had a robust inventory out there right now, but we saw about a 10 to 15% jump in new inventory coming on the market, which is quite significant considering that sales are down as much as they are.
Well, if you're sitting in a community where you've got 20-25% dip in sales, but 15% jump in new inventory, that there's a big gap between those two numbers.
Absolutely, and that creates a lot of choice out there for buyers. So
Yeah.
all the more reason you need to be ready when you go to the market with your property, so your property's set up. So now you're competing against other homes, a lot more so than when the inventory levels were low. So you got to have that extra oomph put behind what you're doing out there.
Yeah. You mentioned interest rates, and of course, we do expect to see likely a few more cuts coming. That's good news for buyers. The added inventory, frankly, is also good news for buyers. It may have a little bit of downward pressure on price, but it also means more choice. And so if you haven't been able to locate what you're looking for, and maybe you are starting to feel a bit confident at some point over the next little bit, especially as those rates come down, chances are you're going to have more to choose from.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that I have noticed over the last several weeks is sellers are sticking to their guns. I mean, we're
Hmm.
not seeing big reductions in prices. I've seen sellers turn down offers and go back and forth, but stick to their guns of where they want to be. So it hasn't been a market where people have become desperate. We're still seeing sellers stick to their guns. I don't think they're being unrealistic, where they're thinking, "Oh, I'm going to get 200,000 above market value on a home," but we're still seeing sellers out there that are saying, "No, I have my number that I want to be at, and unless the whole package comes together to make all that happen, we're just going to have to politely decline. Thank you."
I'm seeing the same thing, and I think that contributes a bit likely to why we've seen prices relatively flat despite sales dipping significantly. The reality is, for everybody's got their own situation, and if it dictates a certain number, then they're not desperate. Well, then of course they're going to sit and wait and ride it out a bit longer. How long that takes, hard to say at this point. We don't yet have much certainty, I think, in terms of where we're going to land on tariffs, and how that impacts our economy ultimately. But
Absolutely.
at some point, I think the world has to move on, and our economy will. But right now, it's still pretty fresh, and I think most folks are still looking at things going, well, maybe we hit pause.
Well, I mean, just looking back at February, what went on and what homes that were selling, things like that. Just when I look through the mix of homes that sold, we're still seeing a buildup of condo inventory out there. So we're still seeing more condos come on the market. I think that's coming a lot from the investment side. We've also heard a lot over the last several weeks and months about the average rent across the GTA has come down from
Yeah.
its historical low levels. Now that tells us that there's a buildup of inventory of rental properties out there as well, and it kind of all ties into each other. I mean, if you got investors that are sitting on properties that can't rent, that are not getting the rents they need to cover the cost of the rent, especially if they're on a renewal on a mortgage with higher interest rates, feel that they got to sell, that's just piling onto that inventory that we got in the condo market, which is, right now, highest has been in over a decade, that
Yeah.
level of condominium product out there available. Townhomes have been selling well from what I can see. They've done well. There's not a ton of inventory out there on that in that segment. Detached homes, it's a mixed bag. It really depends. I see that luxury homes continue to sell fairly well. Um, there has been sales there. It's that middle gap again that we're still seeing the buildup of inventory, that one to call it $2.5 million range, that move up home. That's where we're seeing the inventory stack up.
And it's always, almost always
Yeah.
that pocket. Um, and I think, it's likely the area where you've got the most property, the most buyers, and most sellers. And so when you have a higher volume on all of those things, there's a greater opportunity for things to stack up if buyers start to step back a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, that just comes down to when you're going to the market, if you're in that segment, you got to put your best foot forward. You got to be prepared
Yeah.
to get out there and be prepared to deal with that type of market condition. Know your neighborhood, know what's happening in your neighborhood. What are homes selling for? How do you compare against the rest of the inventory? And what are your expectations, or what should you be prepared for going into that sale period?
Yeah, I'm sure you remember back to COVID. We were leading in 2020, early 2020. We had January and February were pretty decent months. Of course, March started okay, but then COVID hit. And it's a good example of how you don't know what's coming down the pipeline and how that's going to impact.
Yeah,
We knew Trump was coming into office. We didn't necessarily know the extent of his trade wars he wanted to initiate with most of the world, including Canada. And so, when you marry that with typical seasonality, spring market's coming, and we would normally expect to see more activity yeah, over the next 2 or 3 months, especially, but frankly, including February, which is now behind us. So when you put all that together, we've talked about this many times where, sometimes it's, look at the supply and the demand for your community.
hmm,
And rather than say, well, spring is best, the flowers are in bloom, the grass is green, the snow's gone, everybody else has the same idea. So when that happens, if you get that big flood of inventory and the buyers, for whatever reason, whether it was COVID or tariff talk, whatever it might be, if they put pause and the buyers don't come back at the same pace that the sellers bring their property to market, you're going to see inventory stack up and you're likely going to see prices, slip a little bit.
for sure. Now, that being said, with everything that's happened, I want to kind of reflect back to where we were a year ago. A year ago, we had not had a rate reduction. We were basically 2 years in the rate increases 1 year
Yeah.
ago today. And we were coming into the beginning of April, which would have been the next rate review. I believe it was April 7th or April 10th. And there was a lot of anticipation going in there. So March actually was a pretty robust month, comparable last year for where we were, because people were anticipating the beginning of rate reduction. So we started
Yeah.
seeing some activity. When that didn't happen in April and we went off that cliff with activity and we never rebounded, even after 5 rate reductions, we never rebounded. Well, now we're heading back in there again. So you've got the seasonality part. We've got a robust inventory out there right now for people to pick from. We've had 5 rate reductions. We have signals from the Bank of Canada there's more coming. Yesterday, we got a new prime minister put in place. So we'll see what that does. We've got a trade war going on. There's a lot of different variables that are happening there. I still think going into April, we're going to see a lot of these people that have been sitting on the sidelines. They're going to see the rate reductions out there they can take advantage of. Variable rate mortgages have come back, screaming back to the top of the list as the focus of buyers.
Oh, yeah.
You've also got people out there that have been sitting and watching, and now they can see there's some good value out there. There's some inventory to choose from. They can get a home closer to what they're looking for the price range they're looking at. And more buyers, I think, are going to finally take that plunge. I don't think the market's going to explode and we're going to see a big run, but I think we're going to see some of these people on the sidelines that financially have been ready to make the leap. They've just been waiting for the right moment. You may see some of those people come off the sidelines. So I
I
still
think
think being ready, sorry,
I
I
was gonna
still
say,
think,
yeah, I agree with you. I think, there are, for all the negativity and headwinds that may exist, there's still a lot of positive out there. And,
absolutely. And I
and
still think we're going to see a healthy spring market, whether it lasts for 6 weeks or 6 months or whatever happens, I don't know. And honestly, I don't know how much more inventory is going to come on the market. I mean, just from my own database, the clients I'm talking to, I've got some that are preparing right now, will be on the market in the next, 2 to 4 weeks. I've got a number of listings coming up. People that have been holding off and now they're going to make the sale for whatever reason, whether it's, personal,
Mhm.
decide they can't wait any longer to move up, or if it's a divorce situation or things like that. But at the same time, I've got buyers out there right now that I'm working with that are seeing more inventory, that are seeing what's happening. And the question becomes, especially those that have been waiting for the best deal, when is the time to get in? Because you don't know when you hit the bottom till you're
Yeah.
going back up again. And are we at the bottom in the sense of price and value and that whole package for a buyer?
You'll never know till you pass it.
Well, that's exactly it. So
But if things stack up, and if you can check enough boxes that work for your situation, then maybe now's the right time.
absolutely. And I mean, I've seen that again with my own buyers over the last, 4 weeks. We've made a number of purchases that
Mhm.
just made sense for my buyers. Everything else laid out properly to hit enough of the right boxes that they were ready to move forward. And that's the house, the interest rates, the value, timing, everything came together. And for them, it was okay. Now it's time to make the move.
Yeah. No, and I'm seeing the same thing. It's funny you mentioned being busy with a few purchases. Even though February was a relatively slow month overall, same thing. This beginning of 2025, last 2 months, I've been very busy, which of course I'll take it. Even if the market doesn't match it.
Yeah,
But the reality is, I think that what that shows is that transactions are still happening under the right terms, right circumstances, right timing. And so when things align and as inventory increases, like I said earlier, as inventory increases, you've got more options, which means now you get to be a bit more choosy.
yeah.
And if the right property pops up, timing might just be right. You got interest rates on your side, and spring market's ahead of us.
Well, I'm going to remain positive. I'm going to think that we're going to have a good market. I'm going to hope that my buyers that I'm working with find the home that they're looking for. The sellers that I am preparing to get on the market, I'm going to be very hopeful that the right buyer's out there for them, and we're going to be able to make that happen. And those that are not ready yet, we're going to continue to check off the boxes to get them closer to their purchase. And those that want to sell, we're going to continue our plan of get things ready, be prepared to hit the market, and be the best value for buyers to consider.
Yeah.
So that's the plan. I mean, I want to be positive around it all. I don't think there's any downside right now to anybody jumping into the market. Obviously, we've got a lot of turmoil around what's going on with tariffs. That's going to affect some people out there and others it's not. But right now, I think we should strike a positive tone going into the spring market, and let's hope that we have a robust season and everybody achieves what their goals are for this the next three
I
months.
think I think you're 100% right. You do all the right things, prepare properly, and there's not a lot of downside right now.
And when it's right, it's right. I mean, and you and I can't decide that for buyers. Buyers have to decide that, and sellers have to decide that. We could just advise them of what's happening and try and guide them to get to where they want to be.
So, with that in mind, onward to spring market, and
Absolutely.
it's about 14 degrees today, which is a nice change, and
Absolutely. We'll
hopefully
take
that's a
it.
sign of good things to come.
Sounds good. Until next month, all the best, and let's hope that we kick it in overdrive.
All right, sounds good. Talk
Take
soon.
care. All right, John.